we think about slavery, we don't usually consider the day to day or the gory details. The general knowledge of captivity, hard labor, and cruelty are the basics. But for the most part, the actual experience that enslaved people went through is forgotten. Slavery inflicted generational trauma in so many different ways: fear, uncertainty, humiliation, and mental and physical stressors. Low Country Gullah is a non-profit 501(c)(4) that provides a direct connection to the culture through land preservation and other critical issues that affect the community. I have Luana Graves Sellers with me on Chizuba Talks today to talk about the Gullah Geechee culture, its rich history, generational traditions, and its incredible people. Luana is a journalist with a degree in journalism and a minor in Black history from Southern Illinois University. A renowned writer, cultural authority, and subject matter expert and keynote speaker on Gullah Geechee history, traditions, culture, Luana's articles, documentaries, and podcasts focus on the rich culture and people in the federally designated Gullah Geechee corridor. As a genealogist and community activist, she works towards residential equality for the local Gullah community. Luana's work has gained her a significant following and reputation worldwide. Since 2015, she has researched, documented, and published family cultural legacies through hundreds of articles. Having written and documented well over 300 articles on Gullah Geechee history, culture, and traditions, as well as individuals and families, she has amassed a following and reputation as a cultural authority and subject matter expert as host of the Low Country Gullah podcast. Welcome, Luana.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here.
I was very intrigued looking at your website, and to be honest, it was a revelation to me to understand the history, the traditions, and the beautiful culture that this community had. So, could you provide us with some more information about this culture and its contributions to the United States, of course?
Well, um, and thank you for that question right off the bat. The Gullah Geechee are the direct descendants of West African enslaved people who were brought over to the United
Hmm.
States during the years of slavery and primarily were brought to the Sea Islands, which are the coastline of the east coast of the United States. There are about 70 to 85 sea islands that go from Jacksonville, Florida, all the way
Hmm.
up to Jacksonville, North Carolina. And so, because they were, first of all, brought here because of their knowledge and skills in growing rice along the rice coast, there's a rice coast
Hmm.
along the coast of West Africa. They were brought here to bring the technology and the knowledge that they had that in successfully growing rice for centuries. The colonists that were here just couldn't do it, so they brought them over here. Um, and because they were isolated on the sea islands, they were able to maintain their culture and traditions from West Africa, form their own language, and live amongst themselves in a lot of the traditions that they were familiar with in West Africa.
Right. So, when did this organization start, and when did you decide that this needs to be highlighted, or this needs to have more attention, or we need to retain the traditions? When did this start, and how long has it been that you're working on this?
I've been working on this since 2019, and I
Hmm.
originally started it because I was asked as a freelance writer to write about the Gullah culture. I live on Hilton Head Island, which has a significant Gullah culture, and there was a local magazine that was interested in becoming a little bit more diversified and inclusive of the culture in the magazine. So that's how I started. But as I
Hmm.
went along with the writing that I was doing, I realized that the culture that I had been writing about was a culture that was my own. I grew up in a Gullah culture, but I did not know that I was living a Gullah uh, in Gullah traditions in a traditional home. And so
Hmm.
the fascination with the culture and the writing that I started to do started to take on more of a personal notion to me, in that it
Yeah.
was a culture that I was learning about of my own, as well as discovering more about and giving me a deeper genealogical connection to my roots. So that's how Low Country Gullah, the website, started because, um, well, two things. I was getting a lot of requests for articles that I had previously done. And when they were asking me for them, I would search for the article, find the link, and send the link. And because I had amassed
Hmm.
several hundred articles by then, I decided to just put them all on a website and make a kind of archive for all of the articles. So that's why Low Country Gullah started. But the journey that it's taken me on and the fascination with the culture and the strength that the people had, it just has morphed into a personal journey that I have found that there are a lot of other people who, like me, did not know either about the culture or did not know that they grew up in the culture or are just fascinated by learning about a
Hmm.
new culture.
Right. I would be intrigued too if I was to discover certain things about myself and my roots. It would have been very interesting. Now, once you started on this journey, were you, did you come across people who said, "Oh, you know what? I have something to contribute. Oh, you know what? I know this about this culture." So, did that expand in those in that sense?
Well, once I started doing the writing, it's interesting because the more I wrote, the more I discovered, and
Mm-hmm.
people I was very excited when I started doing the writing that I'm doing. And what I realized that and I was excited and I basically was just like, "Oh my gosh, you grew up Gullah. What was it like to grow up Gullah?" And people would basically say to me, "This is just where I live and how I live." Um and it's the life that I know. And so for me, it was something new because it gave me a sense of place. But growing up Gullah and knowing that, it's
Mm-hmm.
just like, you're in your own skin. You just know what you know and you go about your life. And but for me, and what I have found is that there are a lot of people who did not have a cultural connection, and this is providing a cultural connection that is really grounding. A lot of people, especially Black
True.
Americans, we don't grow up with,
Mm-hmm.
I know where I'm from. I knew that I was a Black American, African American, but I didn't know Africa where as a child. So for me, there's always been this kind of
Mm-hmm.
disconnect with the who and what my culture really was. Now that I've been doing this work, I have not only made that connection, but have made the type of um, space in my life that I know where I'm from. I know where I'm connected to. I know where the traditions come from. I have an entire culture that I didn't know that existed, and I come from a very strong and resilient people who deserve their stories to be told. And when you were reading in the beginning, that was one of my newest articles that you were reading an excerpt
Yes,
from, and you know um, it's one of those things that I wrote that because people don't know. People don't think about the ramifications of slavery. They don't think about the disconnect that still
exactly.
happens
Yes.
generationally to people. And because of that, I have to do the work that I'm doing. It's just become my calling.
True, and it's such a beautiful thing that you are doing. It's amazing. How do you
Thank you.
promote or document the culture? And are there any specific initiatives or programs that you have undertaken for this purpose?
Absolutely. I'm very busy. In addition to the writing that I do, I also do documentaries on the culture. Uh, Part of what I have
Hmm.
decided to focus on with my work is telling those untold stories. So through documentaries,
Hmm.
I am always digging for those, oh my gosh, I didn't know those stories that I can share on the culture and the
Yeah.
people and the traditions. So I am currently finishing up my fifth documentary, which is on the U.S. colored troops and
Hmm.
the dedication that they had to a nation that wasn't even theirs. So that is coming out this fall.
True.
The last documentary that I did was on Harriet Tubman and her time in the South. A lot of people know about Harriet Tubman and the railroad, the Underground Railroad work that she did, but most of that was done in the northern tiered states,
Hmm.
like from Virginia north and Maryland north, but not the work that she did in deep in South Carolina into Florida, and the raid that she was a part of in freeing almost 750 enslaved people, which was the largest emancipation event of the Civil War. So stories like that, stories about the town of historic Mitchellville, which is on Hilton Head Island, and it's the first place for freed men before emancipation and the Civil War ended. They were living free for about 3 years before that time, in their own town that was
Hmm.
protected by the Union Army. So those are the documentaries that I've worked on. I also have a podcast that I do weekly on different topics that focus on Gullah culture and slavery and all of the different elements of the traditions and the culture. Um, and then, of course, there's social media and sharing information and current scenarios and stories so that people have a complete view of what is the Gullah Geechee experience in America.
Wow, that's a lot of work that you're doing. Please make sure that you are sending me the link to the documentary that you mentioned about the railroads. I would definitely be interested in watching that because we read so
It
much.
was
We
it
uh,
was
we
just
we interpret it through the movies.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that the documentary, the Harriet Tubman, is on PBS. It was broadcast on PBS this past
Hmm.
starting in April, but I'll be happy to send you the link.
Okay, I'd be happy to. Thank you. Thank you. Let's take a break to understand what Jasuba is. Everyone at some point ponders on how this beautiful life can be made more meaningful. Maybe you're a leader trying to enhance your employees' experience at your organization. Or you already work for the community and seek volunteers with state of the art skills to strengthen your nonprofit. Whatever your situation, know that you can make a difference. Chizuba began with this very vision, a vision to facilitate every skill and every passion in the world in meeting a social need. Corporate volunteering has several benefits for both businesses and organizations. In parallel, experienced and enthusiastic volunteers join NGO workers, enabling them to serve the community more effectively. Chizuba offers everyone looking to add purpose and meaning to their lives a chance to connect or volunteer virtually with nonprofit organizations from over 100 countries around the world. Visit www.chizuba.net and explore opportunities to find meaning. Chizuba, your platform to do good. And now, back with our guest. Luana, you mentioned about, suppose somebody comes to you saying that, I want to trace my ancestral roots within this culture. Do you also help out with that? Do you support that?
Absolutely, because I can't I can't tell the stories and talk about a culture without helping people to connect to their roots. And so part of the work that I do is genealogy work so that people can trace their roots as far back as as possible. The problem is that
Mm.
with Black Americans and African Americans, the records for their their ancestry really stops in
Ah,
1870. I call it the 1870 slave wall because up until
hmm,
emancipation in 1865, there, for the most part, is no documentation on enslaved people because they were considered property. So a lot of them were not named,
right.
and records can just say girl 15, boy 12. So woman 35 or whatever the case may be. So once you get into the slavery years, it's very, very hard to find those records. So when people are looking for their roots,
Hmm.
for their ancestors, I do have a guide on the website on how to do that, which is specific to Black Americans because of that struggle that we have, and
Hmm.
finding creative ways to kind of get around the lack of documents. But for a lot of people, sometimes when you hit that slave wall, that's all you can get. And to
Hmm.
me, that's why the Gullah Geechee connection to your culture is so strong and an important one, because even if you can't go as far back as before the Civil War, at least you know the culture you came from.
Hmm.
And then, based on a collection of
True.
collective stories of the people, you have an idea of who you are and what your people achieved and why they were here. And going back to my original point, talking about the West Africans, the reason that they were brought here was to cultivate rice for the colonies. But because
Cultivate
of that,
rice.
they
Yes.
were, yes, they were responsible for the wealth that the eastern coast of the United States has, like Charleston and all of the, from
Right.
Georgetown into Myrtle Beach and all the way into Florida. Um, Rice, because of the Gullah Geechee, became the number one crop in the United States off of the backs of the Gullah Geechee.
Hmm.
So it's things like that that people just
True.
don't know, but they should know, that it was the strength and the resilience of the people who made a difference in the foundations of this country.
Very true. Yeah. So, as a non-profit organization, you must be having challenges with financial resources and grants and donations to support this community. So, maybe in terms of land preservation or even education. So, how do you manage that? Is there any supply? Is there any grant that is helping you out?
We do receive grants. Of course, there is never enough money that could come in. We also accept
Yes, it's always.
donations. the the nonprofit, well, Low Country Gullah is actually two nonprofits. There's Low Country Gullah, and then there's the Low Country Gullah Foundation. The foundation is specifically
Okay.
designed to support Gullah families who are losing historic Gullah land to heirs property issues and development
Oh,
along the Sea Islands.
oh.
And the land is evaporating on an extraordinarily incredible rate. Just to give you an example, on Hilton Head,
Mm-hmm.
before the bridge was built in 1956, the Gullah owned about 3,500
Mm-hmm.
acres. The first count was done in
Okay.
2017, and I'm just completing a count now. It is down to about 900 acres now. So, and we're still losing land acre by
Wow,
acre.
that's.
So, it's a significant problem. And just to give you an idea, coming out of the Civil War, a lot of Gullah were able to purchase
Hmm.
land, and so some of the land has been in the family for 100,
That's good.
150 years, 160 years. Um, and because they had a level of mistrust, and for a lot of reasons, they did not get the full documentation that you need, like a will, to pass down to different family members.
Mm-hmm.
So what would happen is, say the father of the family would purchase the land, would have children, and cut off a piece
Hmm.
of of that property to different people in their family. And so generation to generation, they would
Hmm.
keep doing that. And because of that, if there's no will along the way, it is called heirs property. And so if that person purchased the land in, let's
Oh.
say, 1865, by now they could have hundreds,
Uh-huh.
maybe even 1,000 heirs. And so all of those heirs are entitled to the land
True.
that that original person purchased. So because of that, everyone has a say, and it just gets very cloudy legally with what can happen with that
Yeah.
land. And that's part of the reason why a lot of people lose it.
True. True. Very true. I know it comes with its set of challenges, but what can people who are not part of the Gala community do to support and contribute to this, preservation and promotion?
Like I said, we have there are donation buttons on the website. If you go to lowcountrygullah.com for the writing side, or if you go to lowcountrygullahfoundation.org for the land side, you can make a donation. The foundation is a 501c3. Low Country Gullah is a 501c4.
Mm-hmm.
So either way, they're nonprofits, and you could make a
Mm-hmm.
donation to them and help support telling the stories of the culture, all of those hidden stories, as well as help preserve the historic Gullah land. Because
Yeah.
along the Sea Islands, there's so much development that even if you've had the land for, say, lived on the land for 80 years or something like that, and your taxes may have been maybe $400, if someone comes and builds a brand new house,
Mm-hmm.
$1 million house next door, your taxes will go up. And so what we found is that there's a lot of people who can't afford that. If they've been living there and they're in their 90s or whatever the case may be, they can't afford a,
Mm-hmm.
$2,000 increase in their taxes. So the foundation helps those people as well so that they can hold on to their land.
Right, sure. So I request everybody who's listening and watching this to reach out to the Low Country Gullah community and see how they can help out. Luana, is
I
there
appreciate
any
that.
upcoming event? Is there any campaign or initiative that you would like to communicate? Maybe do you go to education institutes or schools to talk about your culture and talk about this situation? Is there anything like that?
I do. I actually have speaking engagements on a regular basis on different elements of the culture. Um, for instance, the story of rice is one of the classes or presentations that I do
Yeah.
because of the importance of rice to the culture. So I do speak on that. I do speak about the Gullah culture in general and the traditions, the language, and all of the
Mm-hmm.
different cultural
Mm-hmm.
aspects, as well as the documentaries that I do. The Harriet Tubman From a Railroad to a Spy that I mentioned earlier. I do screenings on that and talks about the story and Harriet Tubman. Once the Union Colored Troop one comes out this fall, I will start to do those as well. I actually have a the first screening scheduled for November on the Union Colored Troops, so that people can start to learn about that and putting it out for distribution so as many people can see and watch and
So
enjoy
important.
and learn something.
Very important, yes. And do you get a lot of questions while you're holding these speaking engagements?
Absolutely. It's what's great about it is that people are curious, whether it's their culture or not. People are curious about the culture and learning something new, learning
It is
about
interesting.
one of yeah, I mean, the Gullah culture is one of the few indigenous cultures in the United States, and most people don't know that. Most people also don't know that 89% of Black or African Americans in the United States, if they're descendants of enslaved people from the corridor from North Carolina to Florida, they're Gullah
Hmm.
Geechee. And it doesn't matter where you live, there are Gullah communities along the
True.
corridor, but there's also Gullah communities in Oklahoma and in Texas and Oregon and in Mexico. So the Gullah culture is nationwide, and the people, just like you and I, we moved around, so they can be anywhere. And when people realize that and connect to it and find that they, like I, have a culture that is there and ready
Yeah,
to embrace them and bring them in as a part of an entire community of people, of strong people, it's a powerful thing.
absolutely. Well, thank you. I thank you for allowing us to peep into this little bit. Of course, there's huge matter to be consumed. There's a lot of documentation that most of us don't know, we were not aware of, right? So through this podcast, I'm glad that you were able to share some part of it. So it's like a teaser, so people who want to know more about it can visit your website and understand the kind of commitment that you have towards preserving this and nurturing the Gullah culture. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And if anybody's interested in the podcast as well, that's under Low Country Gullah. You can find it on everything: Apple, Spotify, you name it. If you just Google Low Country Gullah, you'll be able to find all of the work that we're doing.
We'll surely do that. Yes. Thank you, Luana. It was wonderful talking to you.